Hey everybody, it's Raghu, and I'm back with Mindrolling. And through the magic of the digital age, I'm talking to John Philip Newell, and he is in Scotland, and I am in California. And we're kind of half a world apart, anyhow. And I just love that's the positive, right, John? The positive aspect of us being able to utilize the technology in a way that's, I think, can be very, very much to our advantage to even start to fulfill some of what you have in this book. John wrote a great new book, The Great Search, Turning to Earth and Soul in the Quest for Healing and Home. And I just love the way that you have addressed our search inside ourselves for reconnecting with our Mother Earth and who we truly are, and paying respect to all living things. So it's beautiful. Thank you for putting it together, writing it.
Thank you. Very good. It's great to be with you.
Great. So, need to have a little bit of background before we get anywhere here about you. How did you even become interested in? And I think my intuition is that you have been really connected to Earth, and that's been a big part of your life. But can you talk about it a little bit more in terms of your experiences, even just growing up, teenager, and all of that? That's my standard starting point. And you know what? I do that with anybody. If I just meet somebody, I'm not on a podcast, I kind of want to know, well, how did you get where you are right now?
Yeah. I know it's fascinating to look at how we evolve and unfold. Yeah. And often there are signs early on of how we're unfolding, and we may not even be fully conscious of the direction in which we're moving. But I was born in Canada.
Me
my
too.
Father, were you?
Yeah, Toronto.
Yeah. The Toronto area. Yeah.
Yeah, I was brought up in Montreal, but I was born in Toronto. Were you out west?
No, I was in the Toronto area.
Oh, you too?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And my father was Irish and born in Belfast, and my mother was Scottish, but they met in Canada. And that's where I and my three sisters were born. So I was there until university years, where, back and forth a lot across the Atlantic, visiting family, that I came back to study and got stuck on the side. So early in my life, in terms of spirituality, I was reared in a very loving but conservative evangelical family, and that's never been how I've seen myself or defined myself. But I'm grateful to the sort of best side of the evangelical tradition, and that is, I think I was encouraged or nurtured to pay attention to the heart. And I'm aware in my life, when I'm in interspiritual, interreligious dialogue with a rabbi or an imam or a teacher from a native tradition or another great spiritual tradition, I think first and foremost, I find myself looking to their heart. I'm very interested in the mind and ideas, but I think something of that evangelical tradition that really paid attention to a sort of heartfelt piety or religiosity has been with me. But there was nothing in that inheritance that articulated or helped me make sense of why I was so drawn to the natural world. And I got to spend many of my summers as a boy growing up on the Muskoka Lakes, north, about 150 miles north of Toronto. And
Yeah, I caught
That
my first pike there. You just
okay.
reminded me of something I haven't thought of in 34 years, but
Yeah, that's
I know the
wonderful, isn't it?
area.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, looking back, I realized it was the natural world, the sort of spirituality of the natural world that was speaking to me deeply, but I didn't yet have spiritual or religious language to articulate or to even understand what that draw to nature was. And then early in my theological studies in Edinburgh, I heard the great Scottish Celtic teacher, prophet George MacLeod, who was the founder of the modern day Iona community. So he was early 80s, I was early 20s.
Mm.
And for the first time in my life, I heard a Christian teacher expressing a belief in the sacredness of nature and speaking also about nonviolence as the true way of relationship, both as individuals, but also collectively. And I realized looking back when I heard him that night, it was like coming home. I mean, I didn't even know what home was then, but my experience was of a type of coming home right in the core of my being. And I made a decision that night, and that was I need to get close to this man. I need somehow to get to know him. And I didn't know how that was going to happen. But a few weeks later, I was on the island of Iona with my wife. We were walking along a pathway on the sound of Iona, and we bumped into the great man. And he, shortly after the conversation began, he said, "Newell, come back for a whiskey." And I'm not sure that I had ever had a whiskey at that point, and certainly not before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But so we went back, and that was the beginning of a really significant relationship. And it was through George MacLeod that I was introduced to an ancient lineage of wisdom in the Celtic world that stretches right back to the 2nd century. But a lineage of wisdom that has often been declared as heretical or unorthodox and pushed out of mainstream Christianity. But deep within the Celtic lineage is an awareness of the sacredness of earth and the sacredness at the heart of every human being. And as early as the 2nd century, we hear a Celtic teacher speaking about earth and the universe coming out of the very substance of God, which is to say that this stuff, the stuff of the human body, the stuff of the body of earth, is sacred stuff with enormous implications for how we see earth, how we see one another, how we handle one another physically, how we care for the most physical needs, those who are hungry and homeless and seeking shelter in our nations. So that was a major turning point. And over the years since, I've delved more and more deeply into Celtic wisdom, and have tried to apply that wisdom to this moment in time and to the earth consciousness that we're in the midst of, and to the sense of urgency of needing to come back into true relationship with earth. And that was the tradition also that enabled me to look to other great spiritual traditions for wisdom, and to realize, as Thomas Berry, the sort of prophetic teacher that I draw from in chapter 1 in the new book, that religious diversity is as important to the human soul as biodiversity is to the planet. And the realization that these great traditions are given to complete each other, not to compete with each other.
How much time did you spend with this gentleman that you met finally on the beach, George
McLeod.
Yeah.
Yes. So that first meeting was just a couple of hours, but then we became in regular contact, and some years later, I was invited to be the warden or the leader of Iona Abbey, and he had long since sort of ceased to be the official leader of the Iona community at large, but that didn't put him off giving me a call at least once a week to tell me what I should be doing. So I got to know him extremely well, and I'm so grateful that the universe brought us together, and especially for me as a young man at a formative time, he was great inspiration.
I mean, it's just very familiar when you first described, being with him, meeting him, getting an idea of what was inside him that he had to give, and that it was a sense of home. I think home was one of the words you used.
Yes.
And just completely riveted, knowing this was a path for you. And same thing happened when I went to India, Ram Dass, and I met the man in the blanket, his guru. Yeah. And I had this exact same thing as what you had. And thank God the universe provided this for you, for me, and for anybody else. You don't have to really go anywhere, especially these days with what we have, at hand through the net and all. Yeah, but I love that, because it's just, if people could just let go a little bit of some of the, very difficult, the concepts that we have lived with, through our childhood and teenagehood and so on, very difficult to let these things go. But if you can for a moment, and there are ways to do that, you've been teaching them for quite some time. I've been involved in it for also quite some time. That which you need will come. That home base, home plate, whatever you want to call it, absolutely, the opportunity is there. It's just the openness to perceive.
Yeah. In so much of our Western world, both religiously and culturally, educationally, we've often been given the impression that we access truth by finding it outside of ourselves, or there's been a sort of hierarchy of truth in which the notion is that truth has somehow been dispensed to us from above, or comes down from the 4th century Nicene Creed in Christianity, or whatever the equivalents are in other traditions. It was, for me, it was the introduction to Celtic wisdom that awakened me to knowing that wisdom is deep within us, and the divine is at the very heart of our being. So we don't have to somehow invoke or implore a distant presence. And it's very much a matter of waking up to our true depths and finding our deep home address there.
Yeah, it is wonderful, though, John. It is wonderful when someone crosses your path suddenly.
That's right.
And it's a shock, and that shock really goes a long way, to help wake you up. And that can happen in many different ways. It doesn't have to be even a human being. All of these incredible masters from forever, this isn't like, oh, well, I wasn't alive back then, therefore I cannot receive whatever they had and whatever they have. And of course, that's not true. And again, it's a matter of working on presence, being present. Ram Dass's thing, be here now. By the way, we get these, I got something, we get text messages, little words of wisdom from Ram Dass. It's very hard to grow because it's difficult to let go of the models of ourselves in which we've invested so heavily, which is what I was referring to just before. And we have the inspiration through these different ways in which the divine connects with us, and these inspirations lead us to really pursue a way to change.
Absolutely. And these messengers who bless us at certain points in our lives, I think it's so important to remember that they also are like awakeners or liberators of a knowing that is deep in us. So again, it's not a matter of somehow accepting something foreign from them, but allowing their words and their life and their vision to stir those depths of waking in us.
Resonate inside.
Yeah. I remember a number of years ago giving a talk on some of the essential themes of Celtic wisdom in a little church in Virginia. And it was around the time that I had written one of my first books called Listening for the Heartbeat of God, which is the image derived from the myth or the story of John the Beloved leaning against Jesus at the Last Supper. And in the Celtic tradition, it is said that he therefore heard the heartbeat of God, and he became a symbol of the practice of listening deep within, deep within the body of earth, deep within ourselves and one another. And in the talk, I was accentuating the Celtic belief that what is deepest in us is of God rather than what is deepest in us being opposed to God. And of course, the doctrine of original sin in Western Christianity has been used to teach that what is deepest in us is sinful or is opposed to the divine rather than of the divine. And I was, speaking about, when we look into the face of a newborn child, we're seeing the face of the divine freshly born among us.
Yeah.
And at the end of the talk that night, a woman, I think in her 80s, came very purposefully up the central aisle of the church with a copy of Listening for the Heartbeat of God in her hand. And she was coming up the aisle so purposefully that the naughty boy in me thought, I think she's going to hit me over the head with that book. And I was quite wrong, thank God. When she got up to the front, she said, I want to show you what I wrote in this book after reading it. And she opened the front cover, and inside she had written, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. And I so often wish I had asked for that copy, because she has said so simply, so succinctly, what our experience is when we hear wisdom. We may never have heard it before, it may never have been taught to us, but when we hear it, something very deep within us says,
yeah,
I knew it.
Yeah.
And
that's so great.
And I think if I had thought to ask her for that copy, it would be with me now. It would be with me every time I teach, every time I write, because it would be a reminder that our role is to just try to give voice to what's already there in our reader, our listener, in the other. And to that extent, we can see ourselves as liberators of wisdom in one another rather than and bringing something foreign to the other.
Yeah. This story you just told reminds me of a story Ram Dass has told. He was giving a talk and he was pretty good about bringing down to earth some of the more esoteric Eastern concepts and so on. But I think he was also referencing psychedelics in this talk, which he was famous for, although wasn't, after meeting Neem Karoli Baba and coming back to America and teaching and so on, he was not involved the way he was involved with Leary and all of that. But anyhow, he was referring, and there was an elderly lady sitting directly in his vision, and every time he said something, she went like, yeah. And, and the concepts were like, didn't seem to be in resonance with who he was projecting her to be, right? She came up to him after the talk, and he said to her, I mean, what is it that just, you're obviously completely opened up in these concepts, or however he said it to her. So how did you get there? Kind of, you know what she said? I crochet. Isn't that great?
Wonderful. Wonderful.
I love that story. So Celtic wisdom, I mean, this book is a direct path to mend our broken relationship with the divine, earth, and ourselves, basically, the way. I mean, you've expressed it, and, interconnectedness, of course, of all things, intimacy with the natural world, revelation with how the earth, how we are in, the connectivity, you can't even say that word, the way that we are, just part of is more accurate, I would say, and justice for all life forms. There's so much in here. I love the fact, by the way, you picked out a number of different spiritual teachers, leaders, and from different epochs too. So it makes it really cool. In the beginning, Thomas Berry, who I didn't know I don't know or didn't who Thomas Berry is. Who is Thomas Berry related to?
Yeah, I'm not sure who he was related to. I haven't sort of looked into his lineage that way. But he was with a name like Barry. I suppose he had some Celtic blood in him as well.
Yeah.
But he was a Passionist priest, a sort of Roman Catholic Passionist priest and theologian. But he preferred to call himself not a theologian, but a geologian. Because the sacredness of earth was really at the very core of his vision and commitment and prophetic stance. And Barry, like his own teacher Teilhard de Chardin,
who I do
was saying things that were not convenient to those in power, religiously and politically. And he sort of stayed under the radar a lot of his life by choosing not to sort of publish his sort of radical sense of commitment to sacredness of earth. And those who came to see him, there's some wonderful stories about it being sort of regarded within the hierarchy of Catholicism that he was a dangerous teacher, right? And those who came to see him had to say that they were coming to see him for confession.
Right.
And I met a religious sister a couple of years ago who was one of those who would sneak away to Thomas Berry. And she said to me, and quite often it was group confession. So, religious sisters and young priests in training and cosmologists and, young scientists and ecological activists were gathering around him. And it wasn't until he was 70 years old that he began to publish. And The Dream of the Earth was one of his sort of earliest publications. And I love what he says in The Dream of the Earth. He says, the universe is so amazing that it must have been dreamt into being. And then he goes on to say, and we are in such a mess. Ecologically, religiously, politically, we're in such a mess, he said. We need to dream the way forward. We need to allow ourselves to imagine new ways of being, new ways of seeing, new ways of interrelating.
Yeah.
And then he moves from The Dream of the Earth into books like The Sacred Universe, and part of his greatness is that he knows that we have to access what he calls three sacred texts. One is the text of the universe itself, to see the universe as like this expression of the divine. So we need to keep reading it, and it is forever unfolding. It's not a static text; it keeps unfolding. But that's the primary revelatory text, to return to earth, to see it as sacred text. And then the second is the written scriptures of our traditions, and he sees the written scriptures of our Judeo-Christian inheritance, for instance, is very strong on prophetically speaking about the right relationship with those who are powerless. How are we caring for those who are so least powerful and vulnerable? And then the third text that he refers to is the inner text of the human soul, and particularly the importance of using the imagination and intuition to read the inner text.
That's so great.
He sees the way forward as, and he calls it a new story or a universe story, rather than just a human story, or rather than just a divine human story. It's the doing to others as we would wish them to do to us, but loving not simply humanity, but loving every life form as we love ourselves. So, sorry.
Oh, no, I just wanted to quote something from him that's in the book, that he called for an exodus, right, from our captivity to worldviews that have pretended humanity could be well by ignoring or dominating the natural world, rather than by learning from the natural world and living in intimacy with it. This is you're giving his essence in this, and you go on to say, our existing traditions, whether religious or political or cultural, have been unequal to the task. They have been unable to prevent the ecological crisis that threatens the very future of humanity. We therefore need a new liberation, a second flight from Egypt, as it were, a release from our captivity to religious, I would say, all the spiritual and political systems that alienate us from Earth, setting humanity over and against the natural world, rather than deeper relationship with it. It is freedom from captivity to the prevailing empires of thought and belief and consumerism in the Western world that will enable us to discover new ways of relating to Earth as the very ground of our well-being. That's beautiful, John. I really love that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we absolutely, I think and I think you say this in the book, but certainly just going into different spiritual traditions, mystical traditions and all, we get so much from it that allows for transformation. But I think in relation to what you're speaking to in particularly in this book, it's indigenous people that perhaps can give us the most relatable, deep, and resonant information to help us empower ourselves to make change.
Yeah.
And yes, can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, we so often historically thought that native peoples needed to learn from us, and we're seeing increasingly now that we were the ones that needed to learn from them, and especially their sense of relationship with Earth.
Mm.
And the native traditions, and it's so fascinating, isn't it, when we look at native traditions across the globe, that there are such deep resonances between these traditions. And for the most part, those resonances are not a result of cross-fertilization. They didn't have to do with one another. So here they are drawing very resonant truths and wisdom from deep within the human soul and from deep within the mystery of Earth. And they end up saying, extraordinarily similar things about where we will find well-being. And they, for the most part, they see life forms in terms of an I-thou relationship rather than an I-it relationship. It's not a matter of just using or exploiting the life forms of Earth. It's a matter of being in true relationship with them. And even when, the sacrifice of a tree is required for their building purposes and so on, then they see that as a sacred sacrifice that is made, and they are in a position of thanksgiving to the life form that they are taking in order to continue to live. Mm. And these great native traditions, and in many ways, I regard the Celtic tradition as a native tradition. The parallels, the resonances are very, very great between Celtic wisdom and indigenous wisdom in, among the First Nations, people of Canada, the Native American traditions of America. Many years ago, I was giving a talk in Ottawa, and there was a Mohawk elder who had been invited to make observation about the parallels between Celtic wisdom and First Nations wisdom. And at the end of my talk that night, this strong young Mohawk elder stood with tears in his eyes, and he said, as I've been listening to these themes tonight, I've been wondering where we would be tonight. I've been wondering where I would be, he said. I've been wondering where my people would be. I've been wondering where we would be as a Western world tonight if the mission that had come to us from Europe centuries ago had come expecting to find light in us. And powerful words. And we of course, we can't undo the tragic wrongs that have been done. And that coming of Christianity from Europe to conquer native peoples in the name of so-called truth, in the name of the humble one, Jesus. We can't undo that tragic wrong, and maybe history has never seen such an arrogant expression of religion. But we can begin again. This is part of what I'm looking to and inviting in the book, and that is a radical new beginning. And I think that one of the primary characteristics of that new beginning is going to be humility. Humility in relation to one another as great spiritual traditions, but also humility in relation to earth. And I think that's part of what the native traditions so beautifully express to us.
Yeah. Can you imagine if indeed these Europeans would have come over looking for the light in the people?
Yeah.
And so then, it's naive. All of this is very naive. I'm expressing, a wish of some sort. But the reality is the diametrical opposite happened. Yeah. And and we are suffering. White people are suffering as a result of this, tremendous arrogance and greed and commitment to a falseness related to the religious upbringings.
Yeah.
That it's amazing, really.
Yeah. I remember giving a talk in British Columbia years ago, and in which I was speaking about the wrong that had been done to the native peoples with the sort of advent of European religion on the other side of the Atlantic. And a native woman was present, and during the comment and question time afterwards, she stood with tears in her eyes, and I was expecting her to give expression to some of the agony, some of the suffering that her people had experienced. But in fact, when she began to speak, she was weeping for us. That we had been so arrogant in a way that was creating suffering for us. Earlier I was speaking about radical humility, and that's been my experience of native wisdom, native teachers. And when we're attracted, quite rightly, to their wisdom, especially wisdom around earth, one of the things that they repeatedly say is, don't look to us, don't look to our tradition, look deep within your own tradition, and there you will find a connection with her. And I think that is true in the Christian tradition in places like Scotland, Ireland, Wales. When we look deep, we find Celtic Christian roots, which are very different from the imperial Christianity that dominated.
Very much like Sufism, right? In
That's
relation
right.
to, yeah. Wow. You know what? Yeah. So there's a number of great beings in this book, and all the way from Edwin Muir, which people who live in the Bay Area, Muir Woods, that's who you owe it all to. Rabindranath Tagore and Rumi. I mean, Julian of Norwich. I mean, amazing. And Carl Jung. But you have Martin Buber. Martin Buber? I'm not sure.
Buber,
yeah. Who I know of. I am Jewish, right? But I was not aware of what this man represented. I mean, I have to tell you, John, I was blown away. I mean, I don't know if I marked up so much of it. But start with, get rid of the word God, because it has all these other implications. And, it's funny, I read this and I go, God, I've been feeling this for decades and decades and decades. Fortunately, being part of the Eastern Buddhist and Hindu traditions, there's no God. There is, a billion different deities, so many different ways, but God, the word, is what really, I feel, penalized us. Me growing up. I mean, absolutely. So my little funny riposte to that is growing up in Montreal. So I had many, many French-speaking friends, and maybe they couldn't speak English that well. So, in trying to express themselves, they would say, "Well, that thing there, you know what I'm talking about. That thing there." And now I have taken that up. That is God. That thing there. Oh, God, I love what he said. But, this the way you spoke to it, I mean, it's interesting around, Judaism and Christianity, and the way that he really, he was such a, I don't know what you call it, a bringer together of people and traditions. He was amazing. There's a saint in India called Shirdi Sai Baba, not the one that died not that long ago, 15, 20 years ago. He lived till 1918 or something. Anyhow, he had a host of Hindu devotees and he had a host of Muslim devotees. They would never in a million years think of entering into each other's holy space. And they didn't know, nobody knew exactly who he was. Was he a Muslim? Was he a Hindu? They didn't know. And he was a great being. I mean, very similar to Neem Karoli Baba. And so he would fool them and get them into each other's holy spaces and so on. And, Martin Buber just seems so much there. I really loved it. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about him? And
I love that the story. I think I included in the chapter of a German Christian pastor asking Buber if he believed in God. And Buber responds saying, if to believe in God means to be able to speak about God, no, I don't believe in God. But if to believe in God means to be able to speak to God, yes, I believe in God.
That's so great.
That says a lot, doesn't it? Because he realizes that this one whom we call God, and of course at best that word God is just a metaphor. But he was very good at remembering, I think, in a way that was deeply true to his own tradition, that the divine cannot be named. But we can address the divine in one another and in every life form. And that was how he comes to this wonderfully simple and profound thesis, which he expresses in his book called I and Thou. and that is that we're being invited to be in relationship with the eternal thou, in one another and in our relationship with Earth. And we were touching earlier upon the fact that sort of great native traditions have the sense of I-thou relationship with every life form. It's not an I-it relationship; it's an I-thou. And he sees that something like the word redemption. He saves that word for me anyway, because the word redemption in so much Western Christian thought is about some sort of payment to God being made by Jesus on the cross. So this absurd sort of cosmic legal system where some sort of payment has to be made to God.
You say, actually, just because you're right, that's something that struck me as well when I was going through the book. Redemption, what he called, quote unquote, the restoration of betweenness.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's about returning to true relationship.
The restoration.
That's an amazing concept.
Us. Yeah. So, to the extent that that we know a connection, that I know a connection between my essence and your essence, we are experiencing a sort of redemption. We're experiencing a true connection between my heart and your heart. And that's what Buber is inviting us into by looking for the eternal thou at the heart of one another and all life. And this wasn't sort of armchair theology by Buber. This was him working out his vision of reality through the pain of the Holocaust, but then also through the tragedy of what he witnessed in Palestine. So he has to flee Nazi Germany for the safety of his family. And then he ends up in Jerusalem and sees his own people doing to the people of Palestine the equivalent of what had been done to his people in Europe. And I still find it, almost unbelievable what he says when he says he's lived through 3 wars, World War I, World War II with the Holocaust, and the war in Palestine. And he says the most difficult for me was the war in Palestine, because I saw my people turning the people of Palestine into an it, to be got rid of. And I mean, so Buber again and again stands with those who have been wronged and those who have been treated as it rather than expressions of the eternal thou.
And of course, these people who were in Palestine, I mean, you're talking about, he's speaking to the late 40s and stuff, right?
That's
something
right.
like that.
Yeah.
Here we are today, so nothing has really changed. Of course, one side treated the other like an it, and then that side treated that side like an it, and it's just reverberation that seems to have no end because it started in the most ancient of histories, right?
Yeah.
So it's like unfathomable how to even rest in it in a way that has any kind of resolution.
Yeah.
Because of this.
How do we break these cycles of repetition?
Yeah. Let's see, just that. Well, to me, I mean, Carl Jung, I think, contributed so much to us over his lifetime and the output and what he was addressing around the unconscious and so on. So I was really happy that you that you had him in, and he said, humanity's worst sin is lack of awareness or unconsciousness, as he termed it. When we are unaware of what is happening within us or oblivious to what is occurring around us, we are more likely to stumble in the dark than walk in the light. We are prone to confusion. This is as true of us individually as it is together. And here we go. We've got this phenomenal, again, we spoke at the very beginning, isn't it great? You're in Scotland and here I'm in California, US, and take advantage of it. There's a wealth of goodness that resides in this, and there's a wealth of the opposite, which the light and the dark. And so we have mindfulness, right? That's a ubiquitous word certainly in the spiritual culture of the West. And you're putting something, everybody, John is putting on a coat or a blanket right now. He's in Scotland. You know what it is?
I'm in Scotland.
Yeah. It's 107 here. Okay. Getting
well,
to.
come on. Let me share some of my coolness with you.
Yeah, really. You're like, just doing that, I feel like, wow, yes, I'm getting a waft of cool air from you. Yeah, so that kind of awareness and the lack of it, is the gross unconsciousness that is prevalent in worldwide at this point. I mean, he had so much to offer. What led you, though, for your own self to bring him into this conversation?
Carl Jung, to me, is one of the great spiritual masters of the modern world, and I think that I first became attentive to Jung because I was finding him very helpful in terms of paying attention to my dream life. And we spoke earlier about the way in which so much of our Western inheritance has been about the rational and has been about the mind. And Carl Jung I found so helpful in terms of, yes, our capacity for thought and for reason is an amazing faculty that we have. So not in any sense to put the mind down, but that's only one way of knowing. And so he invites us into accessing the inner realm through dream life, through the imagination, through intuition, and very importantly, provides us with a way of understanding the interrelatedness of all things by knowing that we also deeply carry the past within us, and he says that the conscious part of our being is like the tip of an iceberg, and underneath consciousness is this extraordinary realm of the collective unconscious as well as the individual unconscious. And that was really important to me, having been educated in a sort of theological tradition in Scotland that prided itself on sort of philosophical and doctrinal understanding, very head-oriented. And so someone like Jung really opened a door for me into paying attention to the intuitive and to dream life much more. So I'll always be grateful to him for that. And I'm remembering as we speak of Jung and the way he opens this door into the inner world. I remember at an important point in my own development, being given opportunity to go to India to spend some time with the great Benedictine monk Bede Griffiths, who wrote a book called The Marriage of East and West, and I think that was maybe his most seminal work, and expresses what his life had been, and that is a deep marriage of Eastern wisdom and Western wisdom, and Eastern religion and Western religion or spiritual thought.
And by the way, I just must interject that this is a book that you guys are doing show notes, okay, the producers and everything. Yeah. Please put link in, to many of these books that John has been referencing, and B.D. Griffith, right?
Yes.
Is definitely one of them. Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I think we need to allow people to be able to access.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when my first night in India, I had a dream in which I was drinking vodka with Mikhail Gorbachev, and in the dream, we were knocking back these shots of vodka, and after the third shot, I discovered a chemical residue at the bottom of the glass. So in the dream, I realized I'm being drugged, and when I woke up, I was sort of reflecting on, where was this coming from? And Mikhail Gorbachev is not exactly an Eastern guru, but this was just a couple of months after the Berlin Wall came down. He was teaching perestroika and glasnost, and this sort of openness and change through relationship. And here I was entering India, and part of me, having been sort of theologically formed in the West, and in a sense almost seeing this truth as an external truth rather than an inner truth. Yeah. And here I am entering India, and at some level thinking, is this sort of inner world of knowing? Is this a world of delusion? Am I going to be sort of, in a sense, drugged by it? Then my time with Bede Griffiths at his ashram in Tamil Nadu was a tremendous transition moment, and beginning to access very simple forms of Eastern meditation was something that I hadn't been given at all in my theological training, because it was all about the head and not about the realm of inner knowing. And so, getting back to Jung, I think that's part of what Jung brings us, an awareness that we need both the East as well as the West. We need the head as well as the heart. And so Jung has done that very beautifully for so many of us.
Yeah, for so many. I went to India the first time I went, and I ended up in an ashram in southern India, actually, of Sri Aurobindo. I don't know if you know who that is.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah, and his partner, the mother from France, was still alive. I was fortunate enough to meet. Yeah. Anyhow, I met with some people, Jungians, that took me through so many different exercises. They were in the middle of this desert. It was just a fantastical kind of a thing. Yeah. But I was really introduced not through reading, but for the he did play in the sandbox. I mean, incredible stuff, that Jung did. Yeah. Before we have to go, we're at the end of our time, but here is, for those of you that are looking at YouTube, The Great Search, lovely cover, John Philip Newell. Thank you so much. But you know what? I have to quote one more thing from the book, because we talk about all this stuff, and I always like to say we do a meditation, or we have a quote, or we have something that leads people to an avenue to be able to transform their day-to-day. So here's something that I was aware of, but not in the way that this is described as a practice. Here's a practice, everybody. And this is from, I have to give her credit, Nan Shepherd, someone else I know. We could have about 3 podcasts here to go through and talk about everything. But here, she had a practice of just being in nature in a way that she treated as a practice. Not, let's go camping and we'll stay, not that. To sleep outside, she says, even for a few minutes, can have the effect of, quote unquote, uncoupling the mind. I love that. She found that as she half woke in the hills, she was free from thought. As she described it, free even from thinking about the mountain, because she was simply being present to it and one with it. At no other moment, she wrote, am I sunk quite so deep into its life. I have let go of myself. In those moments, she's not bound by self-consciousness. Right? She's free. And okay, so everybody, we got to practice this one way or the other. This is a great practice. That kind of uncoupling and letting go of the self. It's similar to just generosity practice is another way of letting go of the self, right?
Yeah.
But I love that idea, and I'm going to see if I can get my partner to join me, and we can go off here and once the heat goes down. Yeah, so great to have you, John, and meet you. I really appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you. And whereabouts in California are you?
Ojai, California, which is near Santa Barbara.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm going to be in Santa Barbara next February, giving a talk.
Yeah. Oh, really? Please, I mean, please do get in touch and let me know, and I'd love to meet up with you.
That would be great.
Just down the road. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, great. Everybody, this is Mindrolling, and you can find us on BeHereNowNetwork.com/Mindrolling. And the other being, by the way, John, who has a major influence here in Ojai, is Krishnamurti. His center is here. He lived here for some years. And he is on the podcast network as well, along with Alan Watts and Ram Dass and many of our Buddhist friends. Yeah. So take advantage, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Blessings to you.